Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be an update for Pan Those Eyeshadows. I am just keeping this project pan rolling from last year. I started really late in the year and didn't feel the need to do a finale and a new intro, so I'm just going to keep the shades I am currently working on. I have remixed this project a little bit to suit my panning style and my struggles with panning eyeshadows in the past. I'm working on 4 eyeshadows, 2 of which are completely randomized from my entire eyeshadow collection, and the other 2 shades are randomly selected from Laney's list of prompts. And I do have 7 or 8 focus palettes that I am choosing shades for from that list of prompts, just to focus on my older palettes, some seasonal palettes, and not just have completely random shades. I hope that makes sense. I am really excited about the progress that I made, so I'm going to hop right in with the shadows that have been in the longest. Firstly, an eyeshadow that was completely randomly selected came from my ColourPop Smoke and Roses palette, and the shade is Whisper. I will show you what this shade looked like last time and then what it looks like today. I had used it 17 times before today's update, and it took an additional 13 uses to hit this pan, so 30 uses in total. I did use this as a deepening up shade, a liner, and in my brows. This shade is super deep. It makes me really nervous about any other shades in this palette. I was not expecting it to be that deep. It did take 30 uses, but I do finally have a pan in this palette, and that makes me really happy. I should also say I have a 25 use goal and I can roll shades out, but at the 25 uses I had the biggest dip ever, and so I just kept pushing forward. Only 5 more uses to get this pan. Next up, from Laney's prompts, I got the prompt a palette with no pans yet. And I chose my ABH Sultry palette. I'm surprised this palette doesn't have pans yet, but here we are. I chose the shade Pearl. If I hit pan in this palette in a different shade while it's in this project, I am going to count that and roll this out. But I did choose the shade Pearl. This is what it looked like last month with only 4 uses. And I've used this shade an additional 11 times for 15 total uses in this project. And I will say the dip is not nearly as big as I had hoped. I feel that this palette is also much newer than my Modern Renaissance, but I feel like the formulas are not that similar in that Modern Renaissance is very dusty and loose and very easy for me to hit pan on, and this palette I have a really hard time hitting pan on any of the shades. I have quite a lot of usage in all of these shades, but none of them have really substantial dips. So I have a feeling that after 10 more uses in the shade Pearl, I will roll this out for this particular prompt, but it will still be one of my focus palettes. So hopefully by the end of the year we will have a pan in at least 1 or maybe more of these shades, but I do have 15 total uses on the shade Pearl so far and still no pan. Last update, my newly randomly generated shade came from my Cosmic Beauty Winter Wonderland palette. This palette is decently new in my collection in that it's less than a year old. The shade randomly selected was the shade Blanket. I will pop up a picture of what that looked like, and that is with no usage. As prior to rolling it into this project pan, I haven't used this palette yet. Since then, I have used the shade 3 times. I've created 3 looks out of this palette, one of them being today, and I'm having so much fun with all of these colors. I feel like I have created 3 very different looks. I'm really bad at taking pictures and sharing them in these updates, so my apologies, but today I am wearing Clear Skies, Cold, Breathe, Snowfall, Comfort, and Blanket, of course, to buff out the very edges. This is a shade that will work with any purpley or mauve toned looks I do this winter. And you guys have given me the confidence and said that Cosmic Beauty palettes are actually not that hard to hit pan on. I'm envisioning like a Beauty Bay palette, how panners who have those palettes seem to have a relatively easy time hitting pan in them. So I'm hoping that's the case for me. With only 3 uses, there's no dip or anything, but I'm going to just keep on trucking along. And I'm really happy to be working on this. So pan or 22 more uses on this shade to roll it out. And lastly, last month I rolled in another one of Laney's prompts, and that was a shade I Want to pan. And I pulled in my Walking on Eggshells trio, as this is one of the oldest palettes. This is the oldest palette in my collection, and I only had 1 pan remaining to hit, and now I have pan on all 3 shades. So I will, that was a spoiler, sorry, show you a clip of what this looked like when I rolled it in. And after 13 uses, I do have a pan showing, meaning I have pan in all 3 of these shades, so this can no longer be a focus palette. I will get into that in a moment. I would like to focus on this trio a bit more this year, see how much progress I can make on this, but that will be a plan for a different project. But this will be rolling out with a successful pan hit. So I did hit 2 out of 4 pans again for this update. So we will be rolling in 2 more shades, quickly referencing those focus palettes I mentioned. I had asked for your guys' feedback when I rolled in that trio, knowing that it couldn't be a focus palette for this project anymore if it had all the pans showing. And I took in a lot of your comments, and I did decide to replace that with a seasonal pick. I did post a winter palettes shop my stash sort of video, and one of the older palettes that doesn't have any pans that I would like to focus on is my Kaleidos Club Nebula palette. Now granted, this is not very old in the grand scheme of things in my collection, but it is getting older and I want to show this palette more love, and it is great for both winter and coming into spring. So I am hoping to hit a few pans on this in the coming months if I am lucky. And then I also decluttered one of my focus palettes in my recent eyeshadow palette collection and declutter video. So I decided to replace that with another one of my very oldest palettes in my collection. And that is of course my Too Faced Chocolate Bar palette. I know that this is going to be so challenging to hit any pans in this palette. I have tried multiple times in various projects once again and have never been successful. This was the first high-end palette I ever bought for myself, and there are no pans showing. And it's getting old. It still smells like chocolate and it still performs fine, so I am keeping it and it's very nostalgic to me. But before I retire this palette, I would love for it to have at least 1 pan. Now we must choose 2 new shadows to roll in. I also realized I forgot to do any swatches, so I will do that once we pick the new shades. For my completely randomized eyeshadow, I have in the numbers 1 through 1,223. I have 1,223 eyeshadows in my collection. If we roll something that is in another project pan, I will re-roll, and if we roll in something that already has a pan, obviously I will re-roll. 575. I'm really excited to work on this palette. I don't know what this particular shade looks like, but we'll find out together. But we also need to randomize one of Laney's prompts. I've already completed 2 of the 100 prompts, and what I'm doing is just removing them from the list and transferring it to the bottom. So my numbers might not match yours if you're also using her prompts. So I have in the numbers 1 through 98. 67. And the prompt for number 67 on my spreadsheet is an eyeshadow that starts with the letter Q. That might be challenging. I need to go through my focus palettes and see. I can only think of 1 off the top of my head, but I will bring options if there are any. And I'm going to go grab that randomly selected eyeshadow palette as well, and I'll be right back. Oh my gosh, I am terrified, but first I'm going to swatch out my shades. So first we have Pearl in our color story, which is a light pearly champagne inner corner kind of shade. Next we have Blanket, which is this very pale lavender kind of purple. I'll show a close-up of this color story as well once we are finished here. Now, the randomly generated shade comes from one of my favorite palettes, the Ice Cream Dream palette. I'm so excited to be working on this, and I would love to have a pan showing in this palette. As I said, it's one of my favorites, and the randomly generated shade was Pecan Praline, which I'm pretty sure is a neutral. So, let's see. Here is the inside of this palette, and here is Pecan Praline. Not like the most everyday kind of shade, but I can certainly make it work. It's like a very warm orangey brown kind of shimmer. Very beautiful. No dip or anything on it, but every shade in here has been used many times by me. As I said, it's one of my favorite palettes. Ooh, this does have quite the impact. I'm not sure how I'm going to make this work for like an everyday office appropriate look. Today I have to go to the office, but obviously I'm going to have to remove my eye makeup. Very beautiful though. Kind of has like a bit, it has like gold and pinky glitter or like shimmer in it, but a very like orangey, warm, neutral base. Very fun. I'm into it. What I am terrified about though is the only eyeshadow that starts with the letter Q within my Focus palettes comes from my Club Nebula palette, and I couldn't remember exactly like in my mind's eye what this shade looked like, but I knew it was like Queen of something, and that is what I immediately thought of when I rolled in that prompt. I was like, oh god, I don't know what that shade looks like, and I think that's the only one. It is the only one from my Focus palettes, and it is the matte dark teal. It's Queen of Blades. For some reason I thought it was the purple, but that's Cylon, so I was wrong. Very dark. I love dark, colorful makeup, but I'm no longer a stay-at-home, work-from-home mom entirely. I work part-time in an office now, and this is not going to be office appropriate, so we'll see how much use I can get on this, but I would love to hit pan in it. And so far, the shades I have hand chosen have been on the easier side. I know they have been, but that was intentional in trying to set myself up for success. But this prompt had me a little bit pinned in a corner, and this is the only option available to me based on my own rules. And I love teal. I love a matte teal. It's one of my favorite shades in Dream Street, which is also one of my Focus palettes. So I'm not actually like upset with this shade. I'm just worried about my success rate, if that makes sense. It is beautiful. It is deep and dark and blends very nicely. It certainly does not go with this color story, but hopefully I'll be able to get some usage on here. We have quite the mix of shades. Very interesting color story. My goal for the next update, I really don't think I will be able to keep up this pattern of rolling out 2 shades each update, but I would love to either have a pan showing in my ABH Sultry palette in either Pearl or Twig. I've been using both of those shades quite a lot, or having used purl at least 10 more times, meeting that 25 use goal. And then if we roll in another prompt that works for this palette later on, I will do that. But I do just want to keep this project moving, keep it fresh. Even if I don't hit pan all the time, at least 25 solid uses is a win. Very interesting color story to kick off the year. I am having so much fun with this remixed version of this project for myself, and I'm glad I made these changes to set myself up for success. I have hit 4 pans in this project so far, which doesn't sound like a lot, but this is only my second update. So that feels pretty good for me. Hoping to hit some more pans in 2025. If you did enjoy today's video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up so that I know, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!